Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share my full review, the digitally digested segment for the Sony A6400. For those of you wondering whether or not this camera gets my seal of approval at $899 US for body alone, the answer is a resounding yes. No question, I'm telling you right here at the top of the video, this is one of the best interchangeable lens mirrorless cameras with an APS-C class sensor that money can buy. Autofocus system, best in class. The tracking sets a new standard not only for Sony but for the industry, both with its eye detection, eye focus, the eye autofocus, I should say, as well as real-time subject tracking and face detection. So with that out of the way, let's talk about what else this brings to the table. Sony has marketed this as a vlogger's delight, and that's because it does have a fully articulating screen that actually will allow you to see yourself, in a way giving you a miniature preview monitor, so that if you want to vlog or just see yourself, for lack of a better way of explaining this, you now have it. This is the first camera in Sony's interchangeable lens lineup to actually have this. This does already exist, however, in cyber shots like the RX100 series. Of course, later generations, I believe that started in the 4th generation, and of course carried through the 5th and 6th. Other things you should know besides the improved autofocus system, which really is its biggest bragging right, this to me is more of a party favor, is that you do now also have HLG. So if you're a video guy like me, or gal, of course, you will have HDR beyond just S-Log and S-Log2, so that is a very nice thing. You may have noticed the kit lens I have on here. If you decide to purchase the Sony native E-mount 18-135 with this camera, you're looking at a total of $1,300. And I do recommend going with this kit because this lens in particular, if you're just getting started in photography, and if you're adding this body to a collection, I probably don't need to give you too much advice on lenses, or you've watched a lot of my reviews as well as other people's. This is, in my opinion, one of the best values and really gives you an all-around lens that can do just about everything and do so sharply. Even though it doesn't have a fixed aperture, still a solid performer. So at $1,300, I still think this is a very good value. If you're asking yourself what this contraption is, well, I just showed you that it does have a fully articulating screen. The problem with that is that if you actually want to use the hot shoe will actually impede your ability to see that screen. So a company by the name of Ulanzi did furnish me with this very simple contraption. I've also seen them top mounted as well. I actually prefer this design, at least I think. It makes a little more sense. You still have your tripod mount here, and it tightens up fairly well. It does get a little bit loose. I have a dedicated video to this, or at least an unboxing. I'll give you a full review on this eventually. And this is going to be the way that you will have dedicated audio outside of what is on board. You can see it just connects right into the microphone jack, and it does a fairly good job of giving you a vlog style setup. Throw this on, a pistol grip, and you're good to go. If you're going to step up to something like a Ronin S or any other kind of gimbal, then of course this is going to get heavy relatively quickly. And that's where I think things kind of get a little bit muddy for the A6400. I've already mentioned that it has a best-in-class autofocus system. They really didn't change the actual design, a little bit higher refresh rate in the electronic viewfinder, which is definitely a good thing. No more video record caps or limitations when it comes to 4K. All Sony cameras prior to this were capped at 29 minutes and 59 seconds. That is a thing of the past. No overheating, another big plus with this camera, at least in my use. I have yet to hit the wall. So really its biggest limitation is battery life, and that's because it does still rely on the good old W series of days, or years, I should say, past. And while they're inexpensive and easy to collect, they're still a bit of a pain because you're only going to average somewhere around a little under 300 stills. So while that's nice, it's not really what I would have liked to have seen out of a brand new generation of camera. But bear in mind, at $899, this is still a bargain for what it is capable of. So Sony has improved autofocus, most importantly here. The video quality, also the fact that you have, of course, as I mentioned, HLG, which is a profile a lot of, I would say, more pro and prosumer, not general enthusiasts or hobbyists are going to be looking for. That being on board is a good thing, but that is available in Sony's CyberShot lineup, so it's not a magical thing. And it's also 8-bit, which again, if you're really a pro, videographer, this may or may not be a good B cam for you. But as far as a vlogging device, a digital imaging device, I really don't see the utility. I know that Sony marketed it that way. That's why I'm even showing you what you'd have to do to get some dedicated audio without ruining its little preview monitor. But the truth of the matter is that this is really just an improved version of the A6300. No other way of putting it. You have an increased buffer size, but still it does not get to the A6500's level. No in-body stabilization, so you will be requiring, or leaning on, I should say, stabilization from the lens you're shooting with. And if you're not shooting with a Sony lens that has actual optical steady shot built in, things will be rough. Now, for those of you saying, Ed, I've seen samples, the optical steady shot is really just as good as having in-body stabilization, I call bullshit. That is just simply not true. If you've handheld any Sony interchangeable lens cameras, both in the APS-C class as well as the full frame, having in-body image stabilization IBIS is big. Yes, you can make the argument that all you need is stabilization from the lens, but having both, it just gives you more flexibility. And even though on the A6500 it wasn't a game changer for handheld videography, it definitely was a major improvement from what I could do handheld with the A6300. So with that said, I would have liked to have seen in-body stabilization, but I assure you we will see that. I don't know anything for a fact, but it's just a logical roadmap for Sony to go with their next step. And that's the next part of this review. I know I haven't jumped into the touchscreen or the menus, and I'll get there because not a whole lot has changed, only a little. No more play memories for those of you that are wondering. You can connect this to a battery pack. You do have touchscreen capability, but not inside the menu system, which is something I think a lot of people would like to see happen already. Wi-Fi, NFC, Bluetooth for geotagging, that's another very good thing they've added. Also, when you're shooting video, Sony cameras classically would dim the screen for both power and heat purposes, thermal purposes. Now we have a screen that when you actually film 4K stays bright. That is something, again, I expect to see across the board from all Sony cameras going forward. I do not think that is something unique to the A6400. But, I've pretty much rounded out all of the pros that the A6400 brings to the table. So it's inherently a better camera than the A6300. When it comes to comparing it to the A6500, and by the way, I have videos comparing both the A6400 to the 63 as well as 6500, but it'll be part of my recap today. The A6500 is simply better in that it has a larger buffer size as well as having, beyond that, the in-body image stabilization. When it comes to autofocus, it does not have the capability of the 6400, but whether or not that'll make a huge difference to you as a consumer is really where the question lies. So let me take this off, which I have to be a little bit careful with. Now, for me personally, I don't really understand the approach of trying to pitch this as a vlogging camera, but I understand why Sony did it, and that's what I'm going to talk about right now, which is that Panasonic became basically the go-to, as I almost destroy my Rode Video Micro there, became the go-to product for vloggers, YouTubers, and I think that Sony said to themselves in the boardroom, why are we not occupying that space? Why are we leaving money on the table? And that's exactly why they incorporated this display, pumped up the video options, got rid of recording limitations. Well, that really has to do with a change in taxation. All of that aside, I think that's where things went. The color science has improved. I've had questions about, is the color science superior? What I would say is that it's more uniform with later generation, more current generation Sony cameras. So that inherently will make this a better option in your gear bag for complementing other Sony interchangeable lens cameras that share that color science. So is it better? That's subjective. I think that it's different. That's where I'm going to leave it. Since all of that can be adjusted in post, that's kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, a crappy bragging right. I always like to see improvements, don't get me wrong, but things that can be done in post can be done in post. It's as simple as that. It does have a built-in time-lapse feature, so even if you were hoping or wished you still had access to the Play Memory App Store with that purchased app that you may have already dropped $10 on, it is in here for free. However, it will not combine the images for you. You will be stuck doing that in post, which comes again to that color science issue of, do I think it's a major gain? Absolutely not. So you can use a battery bank to power this pretty much indefinitely because no overheating issues on the video side. That's definitely a plus. I would have liked to have seen a faster SD card slot, but I have a feeling that is where we're going, and the A6400 is just the beginning of that. And that's really the point of today's video. Besides telling you that the A6400 is a best-in-class DI product, I mean, nothing's really changed in the port selection here. You know, HDMI out, micro USB, aka multi-jack from Sony, and then a microphone jack. That's pretty much it. There's nothing else. And what really differentiates it is what I've already mentioned: autofocus, buffer, HLG video, even if it's not 10-bit, and this display. I mean, outside of that, this is definitely a evolutionary, not revolutionary product. However, the new autofocus system, that real-time tracking that it does, because it will likely become the backbone of Sony's entire lineup, I think this is revolutionary in that aspect, in that light, because this is the beginning of a change for Sony's entire DI business with regard to autofocus performance. And I know that every revision I've covered, autofocus improves, but this is probably the most tangible we've seen to date, because rather than it being solely about being the fastest, it's also about being the best in terms of accuracy, tracking, and soon we'll have even pet detection for pet faces. As if we needed that, like a hole in the head. But that's a good thing. I mean, if you're a pet photographer or just an average Joe or Joette, Jill, you have the ability to now track your pet a little bit better once the firmware comes out. Not out yet. So bear that in mind. So where I would have liked to have seen things, like I said, battery life, I would have loved to have seen an improvement. I would have loved to have seen a faster SD card slot than what we're relegated to here. I mean, the new battery would have made it a game changer. In-body stabilization, I get it. They've got another model coming, and that's what I've been coming to here, which is that Sony, from what I've been reading, is making a return to the APS-C market. In other words, you're going to see more lenses, more bodies, something they sort of took a holiday from, and I'm not going to say abandoned, but they certainly weren't pouring money into the APS-C space anymore. In fact, a lot of APS-C users, until this camera launched, had figured Sony kind of was cleaning their hands of it. Yes, there were many rumors out there, but nothing other than rumors, not even vaporware. So here we have a product that is proof that Sony is back at it. I have a feeling we're going to see Sony try to push the APS-C platform as something that professionals should adopt, and there really is no reason. I mean, yes, there are advantages to going full frame, no doubt about it. My favorite camera is the A7R Mark III. Best value in that realm is the A7 Mark III, but when it comes to APS-C sensor capability and the advantages of its form factor, I mean, this is part of one of the reasons, the primary reasons, that Sony got my attention so many years ago. Because all of a sudden they were giving you amazing still and video in bodies that traditionally were only a little bit larger than point and shoots. And that is what I'd like to see them return to. And apparently they realize there is a market for that. But they do know, or at least from what I've read, they have acknowledged they need to add more lenses to the lineup. That's a good thing, as well as more pro-grade features. So if that means giving us, the Z battery that you find in the A7, latest generation, and A9 camera, full frame, of course, that is a huge win. So again, in a sense, this is revolutionary, even though what I'm holding, I'm not blown away by, even though I've already said at $899 US, you will not do better than this. It is the beginning, probably, of Sony returning to their APS-C success, and I'm excited about that. The prospect of that is tremendous for me, because inherently it means I may be able to travel without my A7R Mark III. If they bring something to the table with this autofocus capability, in-body stabilization, a new battery type, even possibly relocate the EVF, and even if they come in at $1,800 or $1,900 and get close to full frame, there are people that will pick this type of product because of its form factor over full frame. And I'm including pros here because if they do actually give you pro-grade features, it's going to be compelling because clients don't know the difference. Newsflash. You do. As an enthusiast or hobbyist, you may or may not, but clients do not. And most clients don't look for things printed anymore, do they? They just want a digital album. So with that said, I think there's a lot of promise for where Sony's going with the A6000, possibly A7000 line in the APS-C realm. And I'm very excited about the lenses they'll add as well as the overall features. So I don't know when we're getting an A6700, 6600, or A7000, but I assure you it will come. Otherwise, this model would never have been dropped in between the 6300 and 6400. Now, I don't think I forgot to mention anything, and if you're still here at 15 and a half minutes, why not show you what the menu looks like? Well, first I'd have to have a battery in there, wouldn't I? Talk about prepping for game time. And those of you that are familiar with my reviews already know how I roll. I mean, showing you the menus is a simple thing to do, but what I'm really interested in doing is telling you whether or not this camera is worth your money. And I established that right at the top of the video, that it is worth every dollar, whether you're adding it to a collection of, different interchangeable lens cameras, or you're crossing over to Sony for the first time, adapting lenses, you're going to get a great experience out of this. So with that said, looking at the display, which I'm going to make sure to get in focus without any overhead lighting interfering, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the menu and just quickly take you through it because I want you to see what we're dealing with. So you now have you always had the ability to shoot RAW and JPEG. That's not a new thing. So in that regard, that's nothing new, but you now can shoot extra fine when it comes to RAW and JPEG. That was something previously you could not do. So I'm making mention of it now because that is relevant. Furthermore, in terms of other things you should know, of course, 24 megapixels on this APS-C sensor. If I flip to the next page, I'm just going to run through these pretty quickly. Your drive mode. Controls overall, the body didn't really change. I wish the grip would have gotten a little larger. I'm nitpicking now, though, because of its form factor. But they did improve things in terms of easy access features, so that's a good thing. A little bit of a change on the mode dial. You can see the focus mode. You do have the ability, of course, to jump out of continuous and where you want that focus to be. So, but that's not a new thing, by any means at all. Continuing to cycle your priority, your focus area limitations. These are all things that you're probably already familiar with if you're a Sony user. Again, the menus still need a revamp. There's no question about it. In my mind, if Sony wants to make a play, they have to revamp these. It's time. I'm used to them as a Sony user, but anyone crossing over is going to say Canon or Nikon is a little bit more straightforward, easier to navigate, and that's something that I think it's time for Sony to invest some money in making this a little bit more compelling from a UI standpoint. Especially you've got a touch screen, why not make it touch capable rather than just for tracking subjects and shutter release? Those are things that are nice to have, but it would definitely mean more to me personally if we had a little bit more going on. So in terms of movie capability, 4K video, of course, XAVCS 4K is still what Sony is rocking, and you can select whether or not you want, your 100 megabits, 60, or of course Super 35, which I highly recommend. That is going to be the best quality, even though it's 24p. I wish we had a 4K 60p option here. Sony is reserving that for other cameras, I assure you. And we'll likely see that in the APS-C world too. It won't just be something in the A7S Mark III. So bear that in mind. It's coming. I didn't mention the S&Q settings because, quite frankly, it's a gimmick. Don't get me wrong. The 120 frames per second at 1080p is nice to have. It looks good. But when it comes to higher frame rates, this is a bit of BS, because the quality is just not amazing. But the 120 frames per second, I definitely think has its merit. Now, you can, of course, pair this up with a smartphone, send those images over very easily. You can control to a limited degree. It has airplane mode, Wi-Fi settings, nothing new here. As I continue to dive, your monitor brightness, again, basically all things we're accustomed to seeing. And then you have the My Menu settings. And this is part of what's new, because here you can actually set things up that you want quick access to, something that previously didn't exist. And this is a step in the right direction, no question about it. This is something that Sony needs to have. But is it a game changer? Is it a new level of capability? No, it's not going to change the way you do anything, really. Go ahead and throw my Giotti, blower right there. See if I can get it in focus and be on camera at the same time here. And the tracking is not hitting it right now, but that's fine. It's capturing other camera gear I have in the background. But at 11 frames per second continuous, having a far superior autofocus system makes a really big difference. And I've done a video already where, even though I'm still capping the wrong thing, it's still tracking. It, for some reason, loves something that's up there in that upper right corner. So while I boast about its capability, it's defying logic on me here. I'm going to try another subject and see if I can get it to actually finally lock on. It is still, for some reason, going for a piece of paper. But generally, that has done a fantastic job. Don't worry, this isn't, the Windows blue screen of death presentation. But I can assure you, in the time I've spent with it, which is a solid month now, it has done an exceptional job of tracking. Now, on video, not as good as the still side. But what does this mean in terms of keepers? Much higher keeper rate. I mean, not comparable to previous generations. And that's big, because what's the point in having the buffer space and all that if you're going to end up with a lot of images you're going to just dispose of? Now, what I will say when it comes to vlogging, since that's a question a lot of people keep pounding away at, and yes, there is a flash here. When it comes to vlogging, I personally see something like the RX 100 line being the smarter vlog option. The only place where I personally see a use for this, which I did use it, was with my G Master 100 to 400 Sony lens. Now, it's a very uneven package, little ridiculous even, I might say, and I'll show that to you right now. But in spite of being a little bit ridiculous, clean that off, got a little dirty in use there. In spite of being ridiculous, it is still, in my opinion, an incredible option, because it really does show off the ability of the A6400 when it comes to getting keepers with that autofocus. So birds in flight, sports photography, all of those things, that's where all of a sudden you have a new beast. And that's one of the reasons I really like the A6400, but it also means I'm really waiting to see what's up next, because the A6400, as good as it is, doesn't really replace any of my equipment personally. And that's my biggest gripe with the A6400, is that it does not change my workflow. It is an improvement. I mean, if I want to go out there and shoot with this and get birds in flight, it does a great job, no matter how unbalanced it is. But ultimately, I would like to see a more robust camera than what the A6400 has to offer. And in-body stabilization would be wholeheartedly welcomed with a lens like this. I don't even need to explain that, hopefully. Now, another thing I want to discuss is vertical grip, because you can use a vertical grip, for those of you that are wondering. The Makey vertical grip, which I have right here, can easily be attached, very inexpensive. You load up 2 batteries, and essentially just have to, I'd previously done a video on this, which I was incorrect about, but I've already done an update, a new video on that. And basically, you just want to make sure that it's in the off position, otherwise it will drain batteries. And you just connect this cable right here, okay, to the jack on board, micro USB, and this goes right here, and you're in business. Now you have double the battery capacity, as well as an actual vertical shutter release. So that's a very nice touch to have at a very inexpensive price. The only thing is, this will be slightly exposed because this grip was designed for the A6500. So the A6400 having a slightly smaller grip, you're going to have part of this exposed. So bear that in mind. But otherwise, I think that pretty much rounds things out. I mean, the A6400 is a beyond competent DI solution. There goes my lighting. Of course, video ran longer than anticipated, but hopefully the darkness won't dissuade you. I'm very happy with it. I think that if you pick it up, you will have no regrets. It is easily the best APS-C mirrorless interchangeable lens camera on the market right now. Even though I still love my A6500, there's no question that if I'm taking out an APS-C mirrorless camera with this lens, the A6400 will outperform the A6500. So with all of that aside, I think I've covered pretty much everything you need to know about this camera. It's great, priced well, and eventually the price is only going to drop, making it an even more impressive value. So that's pretty much it, folks. Hope you enjoyed the video. It was an in-depth one, and I was also giving you a little bit of a roadmap for the future of what I anticipate as someone who's covered Sony cameras for quite a long time at this point. But that pretty much is it. Hope you enjoyed. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button. And as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.